Yeah, tell me. I know that you've been up to a lot of really cool things. Maybe just tell me about a few of them. Like what's been going on the book side of things?
So, I believe the last time we talked, actually, I had pitched sort of a fantasy that I had written. I actually ended up, shortly after our conversation, I started a different manuscript, sort of as a personal challenge right around the start of quarantine, because I had never written anything with any romance in it before. And so I decided to write a romance, and I actually set the romance in Iceland because, right, what you know. And That's what landed me an agent, not the fantasy. So
Really
um,
interesting.
yeah, it actually, it was interesting because it did start out just as a very personal, like, well, I'm going to do this to make myself do it. And then when I finished it, I was like, I guess I could query a few people. And I sent out a few queries and got really positive response. I got like a couple full manuscript requests like right away. And so it
That's
was like,
insane.
okay, this is different than the response I was getting with the fantasy. So I've shelved the fantasy for now and been working on editing that romance. Now it's out on submission, and I have a couple other projects. Kind of, it's been a busy year.
Tell me a bit about the romance in Iceland. That sounds awesome.
Sure. So the premise is kind of just simple, straightforward. I guess a lot of romance is. But it's about a woman from London who leaves behind her stagnant life. You know, she just got out of a bad relationship and goes to do a work stay program in remote southern Iceland. And while there, she didn't really expect to fall for a local, but she sort of ends up falling for her rude, standoffish boss at the work stay program. So it's kind of a enemies to lovers type thing. Um, but yeah, so I queried a few agents with that and ended up, my current agent, Amy, she was like my top pick when I was querying for this. Actually, I had like little stars next to her name and everything. Um, and she read it within like 2 weeks of me sending it to her and offered representation. And so then we spent a few months editing, and now we're just kind of waiting to see what kind of book deal we might get.
That's awesome. So like how did you go about once you've written the book, how did you go about like thinking about what kind of an agent or which agent would be the best fit for it?
So I spend, well, I should say I spent, because I don't have to anymore. I spent a ridiculous amount of time on manuscript wish lists. I literally went through like the whole list alphabetically and just would read what each agent was looking for. And in the case of Amy, she had on her manuscript, I think it's still there. It says that she's seeking romance and that she loves small town and international settings. And I was like, okay, so I feel like I'm hitting a lot of marks here with this, small town Icelandic romance. And so I actually waited to query her and queried some people that were just not the perfect fit to see the responses first before I finally was like, okay, now I'll send it to the person I think will really want to see it. And it turned out it worked. So
That's awesome. So I guess like how did you go from like the idea to like figuring out how to like taking that whole story and figuring out how to like put it to a pitch that would be exciting to someone?
oh, uh, so I wrote up a draft actually of the pitch that was going to go in my query letter. And I ran that by a few different friends and family members just to try and get feedback, I guess. To be honest, I don't remember what that first draft even looked like. um, but I really kind of leaned into what I thought were the marketable points and like the big selling points, which was, of course, the unique setting. So I had to make sure I captured a little bit of that, Icelandic sort of I want to say mysticism because Iceland is a very unique country, but it's not quite the word I'm looking for. Just you know what I mean. Just kind of that Nordic, um, remote, cold, the cold and distant landscapes. I had to capture that setting within the short pitch. And then from there, it was kind of leaning into the enemies to lovers thing because I know that's also a good selling point. And yeah, I think I sent out like 12 or 13 queries in total. And of those, 8 agents requested the full. So that's when I was like, okay, I think I'm doing something right with this one that I wasn't doing right with my previous manuscript, because I definitely never got that kind of response.
Wow, that's crazy. So it's really kind of like you really kind of had to like experiment with it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I had to resist that urge, to constantly keep tweaking it after I had sent out queries, to then be going back to the actual manuscript itself and be making little changes. And I just kind of had to sit back and say, okay, I'm going to wait, see the responses, and then go from there. And I think it was about like 2 months from the time I had finished my edits to the time that I signed with Amy, approximately. It was a pretty quick process compared to my fantasy. I think I spent like 6 months querying or 8 months querying before I was like, maybe this isn't going as well as it could.
Yeah. Very cool. So I guess once because I've never gone through this process, so I don't know a ton about it. But like once you go from like pitching the story to an agent, and then the agent accepts it, I guess I'm guessing after that, kind of from what you're just talking about and from what I like read about, there's like a period of time where you have to do edits, right? Like based on what the agent wants. Is that how it works?
So I can't speak to every agent, and I think it's kind of a unique experience for everybody. For me, Amy was actually an editor at Macmillan for 7 years, I think, before she was an agent. So she's very editorial as an agent. So from the very first call where she made the offer of representation, she kind of told me like she had a few things in mind, that there were certain characters she would want to see more of. Not really a specific word count goal or anything like that. It was just sort of what she was envisioning. And at the end of the day, it was up to me if I wanted to incorporate that feedback. But then once I actually signed with her officially, she sent me an editorial letter, so to speak, which was just a few pages that she wrote up, kind of focusing on, okay, more of this character, let's fix this little problem, let's explain this better, that sort of thing. So it was extremely helpful, because editing on my own, I probably wouldn't have thought about some of the stuff that she pointed out. And she certainly never told me how to correct it or anything like that. It was just, here's what I'm seeing. And then we would have a call after the letter where we kind of discuss. I kind of pitched like, okay, here's what I would do to change that.
Mm.
And she would kind of like, I guess, just spitball ideas back and forth with me. And we've actually had a couple of those calls now for different projects as well. And it's one of my favorite things about having an agent, is just having somebody that I can call up for an hour and a half and just talk about my ideas. It's pretty fun.
That's super cool. I feel like that would be that's such a rare like experience to be able to do that with someone who really knows what they're doing.
Oh yeah.
I feel like any like writer, especially like a creative writer, would love to have that. So I guess I guess not without giving anything away from the story, but how much do you feel like how much do you think did you feel like overall changed from the time that you like pitched it to the time you got done with all your edits? Was it like a lot like big differences, or was it overall pretty much the same? Or
So I would say the core story is more or less the same. We didn't really change a whole lot of significant plot points or anything like that. A lot of it was elaborating on things, really bringing more of the setting to the forefront. I kind of felt when I was first drafting it, I didn't want it to read like a tour guide kind of playbook, where I was just, taking the reader to every iconic Icelandic location I could think
yeah.
of. And so I kind of went, I guess, light-handed when I first wrote it. And Amy said, just go ahead, if you can transport the reader, transport the reader. No one's going to think that you're just going through a laundry list of locations or anything like that. And so I ended up adding a lot of scenes. I think we went from, I believe it was 63,000 words when I queried, which was kind of on the lower side, to it's 99,000 now.
Oh wow, that's
So
pretty significant.
yeah, I get a little, I guess, overzealous with adding in scenes, but it's crazy because it didn't feel like I was adding that much when I was adding it. And then kind of at the end of the day, I look at the word count and it's like, oh, wow.
I think that's really interesting though, that because I know I've read some things that say like when you know that you have the book, you kind of know,
Mm,
like because a lot of people write several books before they ever get one like published.
yeah.
Uh, But I guess it sounds in your case almost like you didn't really know, you were just kind of trying it, you know, and then it
Yeah.
ended up working out. It's kind of, I just think that's interesting. So
Yeah, I definitely, in coming up with the idea, it was a very basic idea at the start, you know, and then it just kind of fleshed out as I wrote it, where the characters developed more depth, and the editing process did help that a lot, actually. In that, in my first draft, I don't know that the love interest was super fleshed out. I thought he was in my own head, but that didn't come across on the page necessarily.
interesting.
But yeah, I definitely didn't think that, oh, this idea is going to be the idea that lands me an agent. It wasn't like that until I started getting the full manuscript requests, and then I was like, maybe, but I still didn't want to get my hopes up.
That's so cool though. But I honestly, now that we're talking about it, I can kind of see why that idea would. Obviously, I mean, of course, like from romance, probably does pretty well in general. But I feel like people have a lot of interest in Iceland right now.
Yeah.
Like, tourism's on the rise there, and I don't think I've ever read like an American take on like some romance that happens in Iceland. I don't know. I've never read something like that, so it sounds super unique.
Yeah, I was actually really scared when I had the idea to Google and see if anybody else had done it. That sounds so ridiculous because like either they've done it or they haven't. But I was just like halfway through writing it and I was like, has anybody else written this? And so then I was kind of like, do I want to Google this or do I want to just finish writing and not demotivate myself?
Yeah.
But I didn't, I did eventually Google it because I was looking for comparison titles and I didn't see anything that immediately came up. Mostly what came up were like, Icelandic books written by Icelanders.
Yeah,
Because,
totally.
they have a crazy rate of like authors there compared to other
Oh,
countries.
yeah.
It's like 1 out of every 100 or something like that is a published
I want to
author.
say it's 1 in 10, but I could be wrong about
You
that.
you might be right. You might be closer. I know that their rate is just insane.
Yeah.
But yeah, so as far as I know, I don't know that another American author has tried it. But even so, I ended up making my main character English from London, and I'm not entirely sure what made me do that, other than when I was in Iceland, I met a lot of people from England that were just like, it's a 3-hour plane ride, like no big deal, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I'm there from California, like I'm in Iceland, like this is far away from home. So
I
I
wonder
guess
how you
that's kind
did
of what put it
that.
in my head.
Like, I wonder how you pulled that off, because I feel like if I tried to pretend, like, if not pretend, but if I tried to write from like an English, is it a first person narrative, by the way?
It is first,
I feel
yeah.
like if I tried to write from a British person's point of view, I might be like, I might feel like I didn't know how to do that. You know what I mean? So it's interesting that you were able to pull that off in a um what's the word I'm looking for? Convincing way, you know?
Yeah, I would say a part of me still like wonders like did I make it convincing? But funnily enough, actually, when Amy had her first call with me, she told me that she was expecting me to pick up and have an English accent because she just assumed
Really?
from the
Okay.
writing. I
Wow.
guess I didn't, in my little bio in my query, I did not mention where I was from or where I was living. So apparently, yeah, she read the manuscript and was expecting that I was English. So I guess that means it must have been convincing enough from an American perspective. I don't
Oh
know if
yeah.
somebody actually from England read it, if they'd be very convinced, but
Does she like have like memories of like things in London that happened that you had to pull from and like make realistic or something? Or does she, you know what I'm saying? Like how did you handle that?
so, uh, well, I have like my obsession with linguistics and accents and things like that. And so I kind of just went, I don't know, I kind of just went from there with my very rudimentary understanding of different accents and different areas. Um, and I have been to London, but that's probably the place where I interacted with local people the least out of everywhere that I've ever gone. I don't really think I talked to much of anyone, so I definitely didn't have a lot to pull from there. Though, like I said, when we were in Iceland, we did talk to a bunch of English people. When we were at the not the Blue Lagoon, but the Secret Lagoon, me and my husband were there, and we were just like swimming around for hours talking to these people in London. So I guess maybe somewhere in my subconscious I pulled from that. I don't know.
How funny. That's awesome. Yeah, I was in London somewhat recently. I don't think I hardly talked to anyone there myself. So I can people well, I feel like in London especially people aren't super talkative, so that might be part of it. I don't know.
Yeah. I would say out of everywhere I've been, like I've talked to people in Germany the most. Not just because I've been there more, which I have, but also like constantly trying to practice my German and keep it fresh. So that's the country where I'm always like walking up to people and just like, hey, striking up
Guten
a
Tag.
conversation. But yeah, in England, I don't think I talked to hardly any. Like, I can't remember one conversation I had that was meaningful. I remember being in Gloucestershire and trying to order fish and chips, and I could not understand what the guy said at
Oh, man.
all because he was just talking really fast with like really like colloquial phrasing, and it was like, okay, could you repeat that?
Well, I mean, like I found, I don't know if you found this, and I don't know if maybe we talked about this before. We might have, I don't remember, but I just found like the cultural differences were really surprising to me in England. I just assumed they were pretty much like us. They just sounded different, and then like I went there and I realized like, oh, they're really not that much like us. So I guess that's why I was asking that. I was just kind of curious about how you're able to pull that off, because I would assume there'd be some differences there, you know. But it's interesting to me overall, you know.
Yeah, I still have not had an English beta reader for that particular manuscript. So there's a part of me that worries. I'm like, I don't know how convincing it would be to somebody that's actually from there. But you know, I did my best without hopefully without stereotyping. I don't think I stereotyped, but but then of course there was writing all the Icelandic characters as well, and that's a whole different thing in and of itself. Like trying to capture the attitude and, you know, certain elements of that culture, which is, you know, certainly not my own culture as much as I've studied it. You know, I don't know that I'm the authority on that at the end of the day.
But I feel like in some ways writing about, tell me if you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I feel like in some ways writing about the Icelandic people would be a little easier because if you're writing from the English person's point of view, you can see them as like maybe she doesn't know them that well, and so like you're kind of getting to know them. So it's kind of like I feel like that would be pretty easy to do. I mean, not easy, but it would be easier.
Between the two, I would say that yes, writing the Icelandic characters was probably easier, and I felt more confident in it than writing my English narrator, which is funny when you think about it, because like you said, you assume that okay, they speak English too, like same sort of thing in general, but it's definitely not. I would say out of all the countries I've been to, I felt the most out of place in England and Scotland. As two English-speaking countries, I just felt like I stuck out like a sore thumb with my American accent and
I felt
my
that way
American
too.
clothes. And
people will just like look up at you, like in England. Like I didn't notice as much in France really, but like in England, if you're talking at like a supermarket, people will like kind of like we do here, I guess. They'll like they'll look over, but then like they're more polite than us, so then they'll like pretend they didn't do that, you know? So
yeah.
I can totally relate to that. But so I guess when writing about Iceland, did you draw mostly from your personal experiences there, or did you draw more from your reading, or a mixture of both?
It was mostly from personal experience, you know, in terms of writing the location, and, you know, locations, I should say, because they don't stick to one place. But yeah, that was mostly from personal experience. I did create a fictional town that is sort of loosely based off of Vik, down in like, it's like the southernmost town, I believe, a town of like 300 people maybe. I sort of loosely drew inspiration from that, but I did make the town fictionalized so that I didn't have to worry about writing about a real town of a few hundred people and all the confusion that would come with that. But in terms of like the cultural attitudes and, you know, how the main love interest responds to some of their cultural differences between the two of them, that I kind of I had to do a lot of research on, and kind of had to draw from, there are a lot of different random like Icelandic YouTubers I've followed for a long time and things like that. And I just kind of drew from other people's experience, people that are living in Iceland from abroad, talking about what it's like dating in Iceland and things like that. That was definitely not from my own experience. That was all just kind of referencing what other people had to say. But hopefully it's accurate. I feel like it came out pretty convincing. Like I said, I do feel more confident about the Icelandic characters than the English one. So
what are some cultural differences like that impacted the story, I guess?
Sorry, you cut out for a second. You said cultural differences like in Iceland that impacted the story?
Yeah. Like what are some of those that you came across that you found really interesting?
So in terms of like things that I incorporated into the story itself. I kind of got into like, I'm sure you've heard about how there's an Icelandic dating app to tell you whether or not people are your cousins, because
I didn't know that. That's hilarious.
yeah, I guess they have like
Oh,
really
sorry.
well
That reminds
documented.
me. I don't mean to get sidetracked, but did you see that movie on Netflix with the singing competition,
I am
Eurovision?
ashamed to say I have not watched it. I feel
Oh shoot.
terrible because I know I should have watched it the second it came out. But I don't tend to watch movies a whole lot on my own. I don't know why. I'm very like I cannot focus on a screen on my own. There has to be somebody else involved.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
I haven't bugged my husband to watch that particular one or any of my friends or anything like that. So I just haven't gotten around to watching it. But I know I should.
I just sorry, I didn't mean to sidetrack you, but there's just a joke in there that they keep making where like Will Ferrell and I forget Rachel McAdams. No, I forget her. Is that who it is? Okay.
I'm pretty
Like
sure.
they kind of like each other, and he keeps saying people keep asking if they're brother and sister or something, and he's always like, "I'm pretty sure she's not my sister." It's like the funniest. I was like, that is so freaking funny. But no, I
Yeah.
didn't know that they had a dating app. That's so funny. What's it called?
Okay, I don't actually know. It's an Icelandic word that I have not memorized and should have memorized probably a long time ago. But I know that like their government keeps like really detailed records of family trees and things like that. So it's essentially, I think it's some algorithm that just pulls all the information out of that and just will like look up two people if they bump phones or something like that and be
That's
like,
the
hey, you're
craziest
good to
thing.
go.
I know a guy in the government there. I mean, it's like probably a small government, but I know a guy, and I emailed him because I just wanted to know about like my family.
Mm-hmm.
And he literally knew my family, like not only just like my family that came here, and they had records of like they were like Gotskogson was a farmer and he died with like 9 kids, blah blah blah. So they knew about him, and then they knew like everyone all the way back. Like it was the funniest, it was the craziest thing. So yeah, backing up what you're saying.
I don't remember I asked you this when we talked before. Do you have cousins that live there now that like you know?
I don't have anybody there that I know, but I do have family there. Like I do, like they know who my family is, but I have not. It's kind of funny because I actually don't know any of my Icelandic family because my grandma, who's Icelandic, she was super independent, so she just kind of like left on her own, like she just moved out to California and kind of was like, I'm doing my own thing. So I never actually have met any of my Icelandic family except for her.
That'd be awesome if one day you could, if you can find them and go hang out. I mean, that's like, I have to go visit my cousins in Germany sooner or later. I haven't done it. They're all in northern Germany, and I am always in southern Germany.
Oh, okay.
I like mountains, so I'm just kind of like, I'll get to the north eventually.
So you're gonna love this, but there's actually you might know about this, but there's a program in Iceland that's about getting American Icelanders back with their family.
Oh, really? That's awesome.
And so I could, like, I've actually talked to them, and they were gonna have me go. I just didn't have I was busy at the time, so I didn't do it. But like they actually, like, you're not gonna believe this, but they literally like put you with your family there, and like you work like at their farm or like at their like coffee shop or something.
That's so
and,
cool.
Like,
That's
the
kind
craziest
of,
thing.
I mean, in my book, they're not related, obviously, but kind of like a work stay sort of program where they house you and you just help out with things. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I would do it, but I kind of have a job and stuff to do here, so.
That's what I always say. I would love to go like do a semester abroad or something like that, and then I'm like, but I have a husband and 4 pets and a mortgage. I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah, the marriage part too. Like, yeah, that was kind of the thing. I was like, well, how would my wife feel if I was gone for however the heck long the program is? Like 10 weeks or something. Like, I could probably pull it off, but she'd probably want to come out and visit. So
yeah, definitely.
So, anyways, what were we talking about? Oh yeah, we're talking about the dating app. Sorry, we got totally sidetracked. We're talking about cultural differences in Iceland. I didn't mean to like hijack this conversation with Icelandic facts, but yeah, tell me about some of the cultural differences you came across.
So, like, still just talking the manuscript or like in person kind of thing?
Well, I guess like the cultural differences that you came across that ended up impacting the manuscript.
Oh gosh. I might draw a blank right now, to be honest. It's been a little while since I've done editing because it's been out on submission right now. So aside from the dating apps and things like that,
maybe just like what are some cultural differences you've noticed in general? Because I've not run into a whole lot of like people actually from Iceland. So it's kind of interesting to me, like what are some of the cultural differences in general that stand out between us and them, and like maybe even like how do they come into play when like relationships and stuff.
So, well, so this actually did come into play in the manuscript, not necessarily directly affecting their relationship, but just in terms of different scenes and kind of the culture shock for the main character was definitely the food, which I think a lot of people talk about. You can certainly find regular food all over the place, but then you kind of have the cultural foods, which are almost tourist foods because no one really eats them on the day-to-day to speak of. Like hakar, and I'm not sure if I said that perfect. My Icelandic accent is probably very questionable, but that's like the fermented shark, that everybody says smells really, really strongly of ammonia. And I did not actually try that one myself. I tried harðfiskur, which is just like the essentially fish jerky, which wasn't terrible. It also wasn't my favorite, but I found out after the fact that I guess a lot of people dip it in butter, and I guess that probably softens it and makes it a little bit. And I didn't do that. I just shoved a whole piece of dry fish in my mouth, and it took me like 20 minutes to chew it. And I was like, okay, the flavor isn't terrible, but this is lasting a long time.
Yeah, that's funny.
So I did incorporate like some of like the foods and things like that into the manuscript. And then of course you have the famous liquor that they chase the hakar with, which is they call it Black Death. I think Brynevin is the Icelandic name, which I think is like an aquavit. I'm not 100% on that, to be honest, because I don't think I've ever had another aquavit, so I don't really know how it compares. But it's very strong and has a little bit of like that, licorice flavor to it. It wasn't bad. We brought a bottle of that back when we went to Iceland and made everyone we know take a shot of it. And some people loved it and some absolutely hated it and thought it was the worst thing ever. But I thought it was okay, as shots of hard liquor go.
That sounds awesome. I'm actually drinking Icelandic beer right now, by the way.
Oh, is it Einstock?
Yeah.
Nice. I love
You've
that.
had it?
I've got Puffboy here, which is
that sounds good too.
Yeah. Kind of my go-to. Because we live up here in the mountains and there's not a ton of grocery stores easily accessible, but for some reason we do have a very extensive like beer section at our grocery store. I guess maybe because there's not a lot to do in the mountains, so they're like,
oh yeah,
what else you can
do in the mountains, exactly. Yeah.
But yeah, we've got a ton of imported beers, so we do carry Einstock and again, I don't know if I'm saying that right. I say Stock because that's how I would say it with a German accent, and I don't know if an Icelander would say it like that. And then we've got a few German beers in store all the time. So that's kind of nice as a beer person to have easy access to imported beers.
Totally. But like, I guess so. What are totally the food? I can see how that would be like a big culture shock. But like, what are the differences in between like how they act interpersonally? Like, are there any differences, or are they a lot like us, or like did anything like that stand out to you when you were there, or what's your take on that?
So when I was there, I found a lot of Icelanders are very impatient about attempts at speaking Icelandic.
Oh, really?
That's actually a huge contrast that I noticed like between Iceland and Germany. In Germany, like if I made like a small grammar mistake or, kind of struggled to find a word for a minute, people were really happy to help. Whereas Icelanders, because most people do speak English quite fluently, they just don't really want you to waste their time like trying to practice your really shoddy Icelandic on them. So while we were there, there were a couple times that I tried to like say like small sentences, but my Icelandic is very broken. I tried to order a donut at one place and I was like, ég vil það, which is just like, I want that. And I was just pointing. And the girl was looking at me like, what the hell is wrong with you? Sorry, I don't know if I can cuss on your podcast.
That's okay.
Yeah, no, she was just looking at me like I had lost my mind. And then another time I tried to order an Icelandic, some fish and chips at this one little like gas station restaurant. And the guy just kind of like rolled his eyes and switched to English right away. And I was like, okay, sorry for my embarrassingly bad Icelandic.
I can see why like the connection you make, like that they all speak English so well, so they just want to talk English. But do you think that maybe part of that is because of how proud they are about their language? Like, do you think that might be why they don't like people like not doing it right? I don't know. What do you think that plays into it at all?
I can imagine that it does. I feel like it would, obviously, who knows on an individual case to case basis, but actually the main love interest in the novel that I wrote, I did make him very proud culturally and a little bit defensive because of it. Um because I felt like it's such an old culture that has retained so much of, its roots, and the fact that Icelandic is so similar to Old Norse still to this day, I feel like, yeah, you probably would be a little defensive. And especially when your country does kind of get overrun by tourists in this day and age. On one hand, I'm sure it's fantastic for their economy and, probably how a lot of people make a living. But at the same time, like when you see people just being moronic or disrespectful, I'm sure that's frustrating. One thing that I've heard Icelanders complain about in videos and on forums and everything like that, and I did incorporate into the book, is you have like the black sand beaches that are really iconic. And because you're so far north, if a wave comes up and hits you, like it is like bone chilling cold. And if you somehow get sucked out into the water, you're kind of done for. Like you're not really going to be able to swim for very long or anything like that. Even kind of in the warmer months, it's not exactly like swimming water. And so I did incorporate that into my novel because I guess a lot of tourists just never read anything about that, don't know it. They come from other places where beaches are fine, and they're playing chicken with this water that can like turn like violent in a second and like
Yeah,
hit you with this massive wave and sweep you out, and you're just good luck kind of thing.
that's why you never turn your back on the ocean, kids.
Yeah. um,
Especially not in Iceland. Maybe in Hawaii.
yeah, yeah. I've actually never been to Hawaii. I know they have the black sand beaches as well.
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
Not been there.
Hawaii is awesome, but there it's we actually were thinking about going there end of April, but I was like, it's I don't know. I kind of want to go when things are fully open again. I just feel like it'll be more fun. But yeah,
Yeah, yeah. No, I agree. I'm definitely missing traveling, but it's not really worth it to travel right now, even if I could.
yeah,
Actually, speaking of Iceland and travel, I heard that they're supposed to be opening to people who are vaccinated, I think later this month, or maybe it's in May.
really,
Yeah, and I
wow.
was I was surprised. I kind of expected that they'd be one of the ones that would hold out the longest because they're so isolated. I mean, if I was from Iceland, I really would not want tourists right now. Even compared
Yeah,
to normal, I'm sure tourists are always annoying, but at the moment, I'm sure it would be even more stressful. So,
I feel like. Oh, actually, no, not. I feel like, but this is something interesting that I know you have a house. You're not going to probably want to go do this, but they actually have a remote work visa there now. I was reading, like you can, as long as you make above a certain amount of money, you can like live there and work for a certain, like like a long, I think indefinitely actually. So that's pretty
oh
cool.
wow, that's awesome. Yeah, I actually have some friends that probably would do that, so I will pass the
Yeah.
information on. Yeah, I've got friends that they're just also obsessed with Iceland, but they don't have Well, I shouldn't say that. They have responsibilities. They don't have a mortgage and a
Yeah,
husband,
yeah,
so they would probably happily run off to Iceland for a while.
yeah, totally. So what are some of these other projects you're working on?
So I have one manuscript that is totally out of left field compared to my normal stuff. I just kind of had the idea randomly after I wrote the Icelandic romance for a rom-com. And that one is essentially based around a podcast. It's about a couple of young women, who run a dating podcast together that's about avoiding commitment. And then one of them quits to get married, which kind of flips their entire ideology on its head. And the other one is the main character who kind of has to play catch up and sort of come to terms with her friend, you know, changing the way they've done things. So that is in the editing stages right now. I already got the editorial letter back from my agent. We're both really excited about the potential there, but I am taking my time with edits because I do have a lot that I want to change with this one to kind of bring out the best of the story. So that one, yeah, that one's still being edited on and off. I'm hoping within a month or two I can kind of get that first round of edits done, and then from there it'll be the smaller, easier edits. And then my other project is a thriller, which is more going back to like I call it a thriller, actually, rewind. I call it a thriller, but beta readers have told me it's closer to a mystery / horror. So, take my categorization with a grain of salt there. But it's kind of going back to my roots in terms of like mythology and things like that. This one is drawing on sort of Anglo-Saxon and Middle English mythology. Actually, I should say Old English and Middle English. Apparently the term Anglo-Saxon is sort of being decommissioned, I guess, in the academic world, and I still have not updated my personal jargon to catch up with that.
Really? How come?
Well, so I guess it's a combination of factors. One thing that people have argued is that the term has been misappropriated by a lot of white supremacist groups.
Okay.
And then the other argument is that Anglo-Saxon doesn't truly incorporate all of the complexities of like early medieval England. I still tend to use it because I am referring to the group that would be called the Anglo-Saxons, and so that's kind of why I default back to that. I'm not referring to like the Celtic cultures that were present in Great Britain at the time. But yeah, so I guess it's kind of fallen out of favor as
interesting
vocabulary goes. But yeah, so this novel then is drawing on Old English and Middle English mythology for kind of the horror / thriller element. So that one I just submitted to my agent, so I haven't gotten the editorial letter back yet, but I'm excited to see what she has to say about it. I hope she likes it.
That's so cool that she's like that. You like have like this in with this agent who's interested in like other works and projects that you're doing too. That's like the dream. That's so awesome.
Yeah,
and actually go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say we talked about it on that first, agent author call when she made the offer of representation. She said that she figured that when she read the Icelandic romance, it's called 63 Degrees North. I don't think I said that. So when she read 63 Degrees North, she said she got the feeling that I had other genres kind of in my head and other ideas going on. And I said, yeah, I do. And she said that she would be willing to represent me for those. So we kind of are just working together as I pull other ideas out and try to shape them up into something hopefully readable.
That's a super inspiring story though. And also the not obviously not the story you're writing, but the story of how that all came about for you, super inspiring. And then actually for some reason you probably don't even know this movie, and I may be saying it wrong. I should probably Google it. But your idea for the podcasting one, like podcasting book, reminded me a little bit of this movie called Arsenic and Old Lace. Have you seen that?
No, I haven't.
Shoot, I hope I'm saying that right. But it just reminded me because arsenic. I think I'm saying that right.
I think
Arsenic
and Old Lace. That
like
sounds right to me, but I don't think I've heard of it.
I think it's with that. It's not Hugh Grant. He's not the British guy. He's the classic movie guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he or is it Cary Grant? Cary Grant. He was in it. But it's this movie about this guy who like he writes like this column about why you shouldn't get married, and then he ends up like getting married, and it's the funniest thing. So it just reminded me of that, but it doesn't sound like that was.
I'll have to check it out because we're actually, interestingly enough, my agent and I have discussed pitching this with movie comps as opposed to strictly book comps. That the working title for the podcast one is 7 Rules for Breaking Hearts, which is the title of the podcast. And so we were thinking about potentially kind of drawing on How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days as a comp title. So I actually, as homework, I went and watched like a bunch of classic rom-com movies like that, just trying to figure out, where I could bring that, I guess the really lighthearted comedy element out more. And then there's the whole dynamic with, obviously the main character and her best friend run the podcast together. So there's also a friend dynamic there beyond just the romance. So maybe kind of going to be a little bit of a dual genre thing, regular comedy and romantic comedy.
Awesome. And we've been talking for a little while now, but I guess one more thing that I was curious about, because I saw on your LinkedIn that you're doing freelancing full time. So what's going on with that?
Well, so I have been doing a little bit here and there with editing people's query letters and synopses for them. And I'm actually doing that on Fiverr. So that has actually been a lot of fun. I didn't expect to get as many clients as I have. Like I figured it would just be like, a couple people here or there. But I've actually been getting a lot of people every month that are coming to me wanting help with a query letter, or, sometimes they come to me with like kind of side projects and just ask whether I could edit that as well. But yeah, I've been doing that. That's been keeping me kind of busy. And then, I always just kind of done, freelance marketing and things like that. So.
Okay, very cool. That sounds awesome. So yeah, I guess we've been on for a little while now, but it was really cool catching up with you again, and hopefully we can maybe do something again somewhat soon, maybe less long than a year and a couple months or whatever. It was kind of a weird year though. It just sort of all blended together,
Oh yeah,
But,
it didn't really feel like a full year. It's total blur for me. But thank you so much for having me back. This is awesome. I'm really glad we got to talk again.